So having differentiated two different types of market orientation, it becomes really important from a practical perspective, from a managerial perspective, as to understand when does one market orientation pay off more than the other. So, when will a proactive versus a responsive market orientation lead to higher firm performance? That's a really important question for managers to understand, because now that we understand that there's two different types of market orientation, where do we get the most bang for our buck? That's the question that we need to address. So here we have again a 2x2 matrix where we have on the vertical axis, we have market turbulence that ranges from low to high. And then we have competitive intensity on the horizontal axis that ranges from low to high. So market turbulence can be understood as when customer preferences, they fluctuate constantly, they change very frequently. It's very hard to predict how customer preferences would change. Under those circumstances, we would categorize that as high market turbulence, whereas when customer preferences do not change often, and it's fairly easy to predict customer preferences, then we would classify that as low market turbulence. And then competitive intensity is, what it implies. When there's cutthroat competition within a market, that will be classified as high competitive intensity. Whereas when there's, not that much, competition, it's not as intense, then that will be classified as low competitive intensity. So then we have four different scenarios, A, B, C, and D, that corresponds to each four different combinations. So then the question becomes, under what scenario, under what condition would, a proactive market orientation lead to the highest level of firm performance in terms of market share, in terms of sales, in terms of profitability? Because that's an important question that managers would be interested in. And out of these four different scenarios, cell D, which is high market turbulence and high competitive intensity, is where if a company executes and implements a proactive, a market-driving market orientation, that is the condition under which they would be expected to realize, to experience the highest level of firm performance. Whereas in cell A, in situation A, when both are low, would be an ill-suited condition to exercise a proactive market orientation. Because cell A, the condition doesn't really lend itself. You're not going to achieve that much performance by executing a proactive market orientation. In other words, you really don't need to engage in proactive market orientation to do well when there is low market turbulence and when there is low competitive intensity. In situation A, you'd be perfectly fine to do well by executing a responsive market orientation or a market-driven market orientation. So going back to what we just said, condition D is the ideal condition to realize the highest level of firm performance by implementing a proactive market orientation. Okay, so this next slide addresses, we look at what is the relationship between market orientation, these two different types of market orientation, and new product success. So if a company engages in a responsive or proactive market orientation, which market orientation leads to higher new product success? That's an important question to ask, because firms are constantly, inherently interested in developing new products, and they invest a lot in new product development, and they want their new products to succeed. So from a practical perspective, it's important to understand which market orientation will lead to greater success in new products. And studies have shown that proactive market orientation, as opposed to responsive market orientation, leads to higher new product success. So if the goal is to increase your chances of new product success, it pays off more to invest and execute proactive market orientation as opposed to responsive market orientation.